Chapter 2. The Physiological Sublimation of Sex Energy. Undeveloped men and women believe that sex is a plaything, something which has no other purpose than to afford them amusement. But developed men and women know that this creative power has far more important uses than merely to be wasted in thoughtless indulgence. The sex glands are the engines of the human body, the generators of organic energy. This energy, if conserved, may become the motive power behind all accomplishments in life. The popular idea that most geniuses lead immoral lives is false, as a study of their biographies proves. The reverse is rather the case, for creative ability, whether along artistic or intellectual lines, is a sublimated expression of the same vital energy which the average individual usually dissipates through sexual channels. Therefore, the Supermen and the great geniuses of the past invariably led strictly continent lives. The few talented individuals who did not may not be classed among the spiritually highest. Their work lacks a certain subtle quality, which is present in a Beethoven symphony or in a painting by Leonardo da Vinci, that only results from a sublimation of sex energy. The following celebrated individuals led strictly chaste lives: Apollonius of Tyana, who, at the age of 20, said, "I am resolved never to marry, and to abstain from the company of all women whatsoever." John the Baptist and Jesus, greatest of prophets; Hypatia, Thomas à Kempis, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Teresa, Joan of Arc and Savonarola, greatest of mystics and martyrs; Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Thomas Aquinas, Francis Bacon, Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Pascal and Kant, greatest of philosophers; Newton, greatest of scientists; Handel and Beethoven, greatest of composers; and Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo and Raphael, greatest of painters. The following great men lived continently during the creative period of their lives: Zoroaster, Moses, Buddha, St. Paul, Plutarch, Saint Augustine, Dante, Saint Francis, Erasmus, Descartes, Voltaire, Diderot, Milton, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche and Tolstoy. The chastity of the Superman is due to physiological, not to religious or theological reasons. These reasons, which constitute a body of new physiological facts of far greater importance than Harvey's discovery of the circulation of the deal with the origin and transformations of vital energy, and with the intimate relationship existing between the genital glands and the lymphatic, vascular and nervous systems. The human body is like a dynamo which draws its electric power directly from the ether. Through lung and skin respiration, etheric power is absorbed into the body, collecting at the solar plexus, the battery of the sympathetic nervous system. From here, this electric energy, the life force, passes to the sex glands, where, in combination with elements derived from the blood, it condenses into seminal fluid. It is through this secretion that vital energy is conveyed to the various ductless glands, nerve centers, and organs of the body. From the ovaries, in the male, the testicles, the sex secretion is carried by the oviducts, in the male, the vas deferens, to the uterus, in the male, the seminal vesicles. The latter organ, which acts as a seminal receptacle, is surrounded and permeated by a network of lymphatic vessels which absorb and draw up sexual fluid as quickly as it is being formed, in both sexes. This lymphatically absorbed seminal fluid is then collected at the receptaculum chyli, from where it is sent up, through the thoracic duct, into the left subclavian vein as it enters the heart. Thus it vitalizes the blood, giving it the capacity to transform inert food material into living tissue, and being carried by it to all parts of the body. Through the carotid artery, the transmuted sex secretion is carried up by the blood to the brain, to nourish and energize its cells. In the choroid plexus of the third cerebral ventricle, and in the pituitary body, it is transformed into cerebrospinal fluid and pituitrin, which flow through the cavity of the brain and spine, generating nerve electricity. It is for this reason that a persistent loss of seminal fluid, by causing a reduction in the quantity and concentration of cerebrospinal fluid, produces a devitalized condition of the nervous system, which we call neurasthenia. Such consequences follow birth control practices. Each night, during sleep, a new daily supply of cerebrospinal fluid is manufactured. Energy absorbed from the ether by the sympathetic nervous system, whose nerve endings in the skin consist of minute mouths, which rhythmically open and close, is conveyed through the medium of the sex secretion to the central nervous system, which is then electrically recharged. When this stored energy, in the cerebrospinal fluid, after the day's activities, is again expended, a condition of drowsiness, or a desire for sleep, ensues. It normally requires from 3 to 5 hours for this recharging of the central nervous system to take place. One should then immediately arise, for excessive sleep might cause the newly generated energy to be dissipated, through the uncontrolled cerebral activity of dreams. It is through the medium of the sex secretion that the elements required for the nourishment of the cells of the brain and the nerves are transformed from their raw state, as obtained from food, to the vitalized condition in which they may be incorporated into nervous tissue. The sex glands are centers of phosphorus metabolism. They extract raw phosphorus from assimilated food, chemically transforming it, as their secretion, so that it may be absorbed and utilized by brain cells. If any of this vital fluid escapes, voluntarily or involuntarily, the blood is drained of phosphorus, and the brain is deprived of its nourishment. Every drop of seminal fluid that is lost from the body brings disease, nervous derangement, mental decline, old age and death so much nearer to us. Until this loss of vital energy, in the female, the discharge of vaginal and uterine secretions, which is especially pronounced at the beginning and at the end of menstruation, is inhibited, one is like a leaking vessel, continually losing the water of life, and, therefore, slowly dying. A seminal emission is the escape of incipient brain tissue. Physiologists formerly thought that there were two separate sex secretions, an internal one, produced by the interstitial cells, and an external one, produced by the reproductive glands. This, however, was a false assumption, for the secretions of the genital glands, including the glands of the uterus and the seminal vesicles in addition to the ovaries and the testicles, constitute an indissoluble unit, all elements of which are continually being generated and lymphatically absorbed. Spermatozoa and ova are not produced at rare intervals, when required for reproductive purposes, but continuously. They are absorbed by lymphatics into the bloodstream, having an internal function to perform. Any escape of seminal fluid involves a loss of the internal secretion, which is nothing else than what has been called the external secretion when it is conserved, absorbed, and physiologically utilized. There is really only one sex secretion, which is an internal secretion, the so-called external one being nothing else than a pathological escape of this. Dr. Brinkley, the endocrinologist, says, "It is briefly my view that both the external and internal secretions of the gonads, sex glands collectively, are equally valuable to the upbuilding of body tissues, and that the gonads themselves are not merely a link in the chain of the endocrines. The gonads in the chain of the endocrines is the master position, and the well-being of all the endocrines is exactly dependent upon the well-being of the gonads. Defective thyroid glands can be most easily repaired by repair of the gonads, and so with all the glands of the chain. The thyroid, pituitary, and pineal glands, which are intimately related to the mental and spiritual life of the individual, are directly activated by the absorbed sex fluid carried to them by the blood. There is an intimate interdependence between the genital and the thyroid glands, as there is between the latter and the brain. A small thyroid secretion results in the development of a cretin, an idiotic dwarf, even as a diminished sex secretion produces a eunuch, an individual who is physically and mentally undeveloped. At puberty, when a greater amount of sex secretion is sent into the blood, there is an increased thyroid secretion, accompanied by a rapid physical and mental development. On the other hand, when the sex secretion is lessened, as during senility, the thyroid shrivel, and a degeneration of body and mind results. Dr. Voronoff writes, "No organ can preserve its vital energy and function to full capacity if its cells are not stimulated and vivified by the genital gland's internal secretion." Eunuchs furnish a very clear demonstration of this. All their organs are like those of the rest of humanity, with one exception. Deprivation of this one organ depresses, weakens the functioning of all the others, and brings on premature old age. The removal of these organs reacts as much on the brain as on the heart, the muscles, the bones, and all the other organs. The moral and physical energies both diminish. Abelard, the brilliant poet, never wrote a line after he was emasculated. Dr. Nicholas says, "It is a medical and physiological fact that the best blood of the body goes to form the elements of reproduction in both sexes. In a pure and orderly life, this matter is reabsorbed. It goes back into the circulation ready to form the finest brain, nerve and muscle tissue. This life of man carried back and diffused through his system, makes him manly, strong, brave and heroic. The suspension of the use of the generative organs is attended with a notable increase of bodily and mental vigor and spiritual life. Nature finds another use for the unexpended sexual energy in employing it for the building up of a keener brain, and more vital and enduring nerves and muscles. In the genital glands of animals and men there are secreted powerful and subtle chemical elements absorbed into the blood and thence carried to all parts of the organism to energize, invigorate and strengthen the cells, organs and parts of the body including the brain and nervous system. Some have gone so far as to hazard the opinion that old age is chiefly due to a lessening of the supply of these secretions. Nature has ordained that all the secretions of the sex glands, in both male and female, be forever retained within the body, just as are the secretions of the other ductless glands. The sex glands are the only endocrine glands whose secretions may escape, and we must look here for the fundamental cause of glandular derangements with their accompanying pathological symptoms. The normal development and well-being of body, mind, and soul directly depends upon this absorbed sex fluid, and that is why an absolutely chaste life is the only healthy, natural, and creative one. Moses said, "If any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water, and be unclean until even." And Jesus taught, "Whosoever is begotten of God doth not commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him."